On today's show, Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun with star-level performances lift the Rockets past the Grizzlies, and Amen Thompson with the best passing game of his career. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, the #1 sports podcast network. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. On today's show, we're breaking down the Rockets' 108-99 win against the Memphis Grizzlies, a game in which Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun did all the heavy lifting. The stars were out in this game, 33 points apiece for each of them. And Amen Thompson with a career-high 14 assists, the best passing game of his career. Really feels like the game is starting to slow down for him as the Rockets' full-time point guard. And we'll also talk about some of the struggles for the role players in this game, the frantic pace of play. Credit to the Grizzlies. This was not an easy win for the Rockets by any stretch of the imagination. We're going to break it all down for you on today's show. And of course, I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being one of our amazing everydayers. Final score, 108-99. And this was another one of those hot pocket games for the Rockets. Hot on the outsides, hot in the first, hot to start the game, hot to end the game, a little cold in the middle. And again, credit to the Grizzlies, right? This was a frantic game. The pace of play was very much in their favor, and it felt like the Rockets were struggling to match that energy, that speed at times in this game. But as the game wore on, as the Grizzlies started to maybe lose their legs a little bit, right? The Rockets were able to regain control of this game. We'll talk about kind of the major momentum shifts, the run that got the Rockets, helped them regain control of this game later in the third quarter, bleeding over into the fourth quarter. But this was a game in which we saw the Rockets stars do what star players do, right? And it was kind of in two different ways. Let's start with Kevin Durant, because this was not a normal Kevin Durant game, right? Like, he's had these insane, 30-plus point performances on absolutely uber elite efficiency, and this was not that. Kevin Durant struggled in this game. He got 33 points, but it took him 24 shots to get there. And on top of that, there were some moments where it kind of felt like KD was trolling a little bit in this game. I'll be completely honest with you. There were some moments where I was like watching the game, I was like, Kevin, what are you doing, man? What's happening? And besides all that, right? But moving on past that, the fact that he was able to, and this is what star players do, is sometimes even in a given game, right? Star players are going to have an off night. They're going to struggle, but star players still find a way to impact the game at a very high level. And Kevin Durant still did that. He still got you 33 points on an off night for Kevin Durant. He still got you to 33 points. He still hit back-to-back clutch three-pointers late in the fourth quarter, as it felt like the Grizzlies were they were knocking on the door. It was only a 2-possession game. Kevin Durant gets you those clutch three-pointers. You get some breathing room, some life, right? And that's what star players do. They deliver in the biggest moments, despite their struggles over the first 45 minutes, 46 minutes, 47 minutes of a game. And that's exactly what Kevin Durant did. He had a much better second half than he did a first half. He had 12 points in the third quarter, had nine points in the final frame. So 21 of his overall 33 points coming in the second half. And my favorite thing about how the Rockets used Kevin Durant in this game is it felt very much like they used him significantly less on ball in this game. And some of that has to do with Amen Thompson's incredible playmaking and passing and facilitating. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But they used Kevin Durant as a screener so much this game. And I don't know if that's a new permanent wrinkle. I don't know if it just has to do with the Grizzlies and the game plan for this specific team, but it's something I would definitely like to see more of moving forward. Getting Kevin off ball, because look, when you're guarding Kevin Durant, you don't want to leave Kevin Durant open for nothing, right? And so using KD as a screener gets you some really favorable actions, whether it's him screening for Alperen Sengun, screening for Amen Thompson, screening for Sheppard, whoever he's screening for, right? It really creates an advantage for the Rockets offensively. And on the off chance that a defender does like forget the scouting assignment and forget the scouting report, and they're like, oh, well, I got to help, right? My man is screening, whatever, and they forget they're guarding KD. Then you get some of those moments where Kevin Durant gets some of the easiest shots of his Rockets career, where he screens for Alperen Sengun, right? Şengün starts gets downhill. And then suddenly, Kevin Durant pops out to the three-point line for a wide open three, or does it with Amen Thompson, right? And Amen Thompson puts that downhill pressure on the defense. And then Kevin Durant gets a wide open three-pointer. Some of those moments in this game were awesome. And he didn't hit a lot of the open looks that he did get. There were a few threes earlier in the fourth quarter where it's like he got like 2 or 3 really clean looks in a row and missed them before he hit those back-to-back threes late. But I really like that, just the offensive approach and the utilization of Kevin Durant in this game. And then Alperen Sengun, my goodness. The dude was basically perfect from the floor. 33 points on 15 of 17 shooting. 15 of 17. And one of those misses was a last second heave with the shot clock winding down. His only 3-point attempt of the game. This was, and look, Şengün mentioned it in his walk-off interview with Vanessa Richardson. He said he hasn't been playing like himself lately. He's aware of it. He understands what he's capable of. We've talked about it. This was I don't want to call it a vintage Alperen Sengun game. That feels disrespectful. This is the type of game that we have grown to expect from Alperen Sengun, right? He dominated. He was, where's my?
Okay, Alperen Sengun.
He was unstoppable in the paint. And some of that had to do with how the Grizzlies were electing to guard him in the first place, right? They didn't put Jaren Jackson Jr. on him until later in the game. And even then, once they started trying to guard him with Jaren Jackson Jr., it was too late. It didn't matter who the Grizzlies put in front of Alperen Sengun. He was frying everybody wearing a Grizzlies jersey. My favorite play of the game was he was walking the ball up and he knew that he had Santi Aldama dead to rights. Like, he'd cooked him so many times in the game already. And he's walking the ball up and he's putting everybody in their spots. He's like, hey, Josh, get in the corner. Hey, Jabari, spread out to the 3-point line, right? He's basically calling like not quite like a 1-4 flat, but he's basically calling out his own number, saying, I'm ISOing, right? Walks it up, goes up against Santi Aldama and just hits him with the hard drive left, the spin back to the right, elevate, and just dunks it home, right? Just total domination down low for Alperen Sengun. And his touch around the rim was incredible. His decision-making was on point in this game. He also had the 9 rebounds, the 6 assists. He had a few turnovers in this, and a couple of them might not have fully been his fault, right? Some miscommunication, some moments where, trying to hit Kevin Durant on a back cut or trying to find a teammate here or there. Not necessarily not necessarily the sloppy turnovers that you get frustrated by, I guess. And for Şengün, when he's playing at this level, and when Kevin, when you pair this version of Alperen Sengun with Kevin Durant, who has been, so unbelievably consistent for the Rockets all season long, it makes the Rockets really, really hard to beat, because now you have a guy that can help kind of carry the offense in the moments when Kevin isn't on the floor, right? That's the whole point of having multiple star players, is you can lean on the other star when the first star comes off the floor. And in the non-Kevin Durant minutes, the Rockets have kind of struggled at times recently, and in part because Şengün hasn't been himself lately. But in this game, as the Rockets were mounting their regaining control of the game, making their big push at the end of the third quarter, top of the fourth quarter, some of that happened, or a big chunk of that happened, with Kevin Durant on the bench, and Alperen Sengun was able to deliver in a big way. He had 12 of his 33 points in the fourth quarter in that period of time where KD was sitting on the bench. And one of my favorite moments of this game was actually right when Kevin checked back into the game. Alperen Sengun had been cooking the Grizzlies, right? Just completely unstoppable. And Kevin's back in the game. LP, is getting ready to make another move. And nobody would have blamed Alperen Sengun for continuing to keep the ball, go after it, keep trying to score, keep dominating, whatever. And instead, he goes to make a move, and then he immediately backs off and pitches the ball out to Kevin and gets a little two-man game going with KD, and it winds up resulting in a KD three-pointer because the defense at that point was so locked in on trying to stop Alperen Sengun that they kind of forgot that Kevin existed because he'd been sitting on the bench. So KD checks back in, it was a little bit of kind of inside out two-man game. Alp tries to drive. He flips it back to KD. KD gets it back to Şengün. Şengün makes another move towards the paint. The entire Grizzlies team reacts to him and they're like, oh, we got to stop him. He's been dominating us. He flips it back out to KD for one of the easiest three-pointers KD shot as a member of the Houston Rockets. Loved how they played off of one another. Loved how they took turns dominating this Grizzlies team. 66 combined points for the Rockets star players. They did all the heavy lifting in this game, and they certainly needed to because the role players struggled mightily in this one. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. We're also going to talk about Amen Thompson with the best passing game of his entire career high 14 assists in this one, how the game is slowing down for him. We're going to get into all of that here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. TurboTax full service can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online, and they handle everything. I mean everything from W-2s to self-employed forms, and they work to get you every single deduction possible. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off of your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. And the NBA trade deadline is basically here, and we want to give you a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club to help you get ready. If you need a group chat to keep up with the chaos, join our group chat. The Everydayer Club gets you access to a group chat on Discord for Rockets fans, plus national chats where you can hang out with fans from across the league. You'll also get ad-free versions of this show. And if you sign up by the trade deadline on February 5th, you can use code DEADLINE to get your first month free. Tap the link in the show notes to learn more. And I haven't had a chance to, really get into and talk about our Everydayer Club. It's been a new thing that Locked On has kind of rolled out recently, and I'm looking forward to it. It's a group chat for every team, every show, every fan base, and it's something that Locked On put together recently, and it's honestly pretty exciting. It's cool stuff. It's going to be a chance, another chance for us to connect as Rockets fans, as fans of this team, to discuss what's going on with this team. And I've got some ideas for some kind of behind the scenes extras and some cool stuff that I'm going to be putting on the Everydayer Discord group chat. One of the first things I want to do is a behind the scenes look at Toyota Center. The next time I'm there in person for one of the games, I want to kind of walk you through what a game day experience is like for me, what it looks like when I get to the game early, what it's like when I'm walking around, chatting up, assistant coaches, agents, that kind of stuff, what the behind the scenes tunnel looks like at Toyota Center, all that good stuff. So I'm going to have that on the Everydayer channel soon. So be sure to check that out. Go click the link in the episode description. And again, ad-free versions of the show if you sign up. So if you don't like the ads in the show, that's one way to get rid of them. All right. Continuing on here, talking about the Rockets 108-99 win against the Grizzlies. And this was such a weird game because, again, the Grizzlies, credit to them, they played with such frantic energy and pace. And again, it kind of total hot pocket game because the Rockets started off and they looked like it was about to be a very ugly game early for the Grizzlies because it felt like the Rockets could not miss to start the game. And then they just went like ice cold, couldn't hit any shots. The offense kind of fell out from under them a little bit. And again, when you've got, when KD starts the game 1 for 6, when Sheppard, who's been one of your biggest offensive weapons of the season so far, starts the game 1 for 5, like it was not a great sign. And the Grizzlies on the other end, they themselves weren't having a great shooting game either. They finished the game just shooting 19% from long distance, 7 of 37 overall, only 37% overall from the floor. but they were hustling and they were beating the Rockets in all of those kind of like hustle stats categories, right? They were beating them in transition. They were beating them on second chance opportunities. They were beating them in offensive rebound. Like they were just doing all the extra dirty work to compete in this game. And that's what, teams that are injured and missing star players and, maybe, further down the bottom of the standings, right? Sometimes they can sneak up on you because they'll beat you with hustle, right? They'll beat you in ways that you don't expect to be beaten. And it took until the second half of this game for things to kind of settle down. And again, maybe you chalk it up to some dead legs from the Grizzlies. They had a weird travel day with the winter storm and stuff going on. And so they didn't fly into Houston until the day of the game. They had their Sunday game postponed and it was like a whole thing. So ultimately, some I guess environmental factors potentially at play for the Grizzlies, but it doesn't matter. You play who's in front of you. And I think that as the game wore on, you saw the Grizzlies unable to maintain that level of high octane pace of play. And once the game started to slow down a little bit, that's where the Rockets were able to really take back control of things. And it happened at kind of end of the third quarter, bleeding into the fourth quarter. The Rockets had a 22-5 run that spanned the end of the third quarter and the beginning of the fourth quarter. It was a 12-2 run to start that fourth quarter. And that's how the Rockets were able to regain control of the game, take things back over. And again, some of that had to do, it directly coincided with, Alperen Sengun's dominance there to start the fourth quarter. His 12 points scored in that frame, most of that damage being done while Kevin Durant was sitting. But also it really felt like the Rockets found some lineups in there that really maximized both sides of the ball specifically. And this is why it's so important when you have Tari, Eason, and DFS both healthy. This was not a Reed Sheppard game. It was not. It was a bad Reed Sheppard game. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about his struggles a little bit later on. Pardon me for the coughing. But the Rockets were able to lean into the defensive side of the ball, right? They were able to lean into lineups that featured one of Kevin Durant or Alperen Sengun, and then just surrounding those guys with plus level defenders, right? Lineups that were Jabari, Tari, Okogie, Tate, DFS, and that worked. It worked really well for the Rockets in this game. So liked what we saw there, liked how the role players, despite their struggles offensively, were doing their job on the defensive side of the ball in particular. So that was encouraging to see. But the other biggest part of this game, right? The stars did their heavy lifting, right? Şengün, KD, and some of that was just Şengün and KD ISOing and frying the Grizzlies and them having no answer. Other parts of it, though, was those guys being set up beautifully by Amen Thompson. Amen Thompson with the best passing game of his career. And it's so incredible watching how it's all starting to click for Amen Thompson. And it's really felt that way over the last handful of games in particular, right? He's had a bunch of these games with, 6, 7, 8 assists, only 1 turnover. He did have 4 turnovers in this one, but 14 assists to 4 turnovers is still an incredible assist to turnover ratio. And when we're talking about like the kinds of assists that he's getting, these aren't just like, swing the ball around the perimeter and, he swings it to the open man and he knocks down a shot, right? These are assists that Amen Thompson is creating. He is creating good offense for this Rockets team, putting pressure on the Grizzlies by driving, getting downhill, getting a paint touch, and then spraying it out to an open shooter. It was like, and it's his court vision and his awareness and his anticipation of where his teammates are going to be as they're, filling lanes in transition, or how they're kind of rotating and moving around in the half court or cutting in the half court, as well as his anticipation and understanding of where the defense is rotating, right? How certain guys are trying to cut off these passing lanes or these openings, and him still finding a way to deliver the basketball. And again, this goes back to what I was talking about a little bit early on with Kevin Durant as a screener. And it really felt like the Rockets may have kind of found something special here with Kevin Durant setting screens for Amen Thompson and what that kind of does, because KD's man does not want to leave him. And that gives Amen Thompson a very clear driving lane, a downhill path towards the basket. And even though Amen didn't have one of his usual, scoring performances, getting it done in and around the rim, only 8 points on 3 of 10 shooting, the passing was so encouraging because what he's capable of, scoring the ball, scoring in the paint, getting it done, inside and around the rim. And, when he's playing out of the dunker spot and all that good stuff. But to see him have this kind of passing, now it's about trying to marry the two versions of him, right? Because if you can get the version of Amen Thompson that can get downhill and score at the rim with relative ease and, put all that pressure, that scoring pressure on the defense, as well as the version of him that is able to facilitate at such a high level. And honestly, he might have walked away with even more assists than the 14 he did have if the Rockets weren't struggling so much to shoot the basketball in this game. Again, just 45% from the floor, 30% from downtown in this one. I'm eager to go back and look, and once the tracking data updates, to see what his potential assists ultimately looked like in this game, because there were a lot of guys that struggled shooting the ball in this game. So for Amen, him kind of turning the corner as the Rockets point guard is one of the most, and quite possibly maybe the most important development of this entire season, because we know what Kevin Durant's capable of. We know what Alperen Sengun's capable of. We even know what the defense is capable of when it's locked in and engaged, because we've seen the stretches where this Rockets defense does look like a top tier, top 5 kind of defense. The question and the Achilles heel for this Rockets team as we continue navigating through the season is going to continue to be what does the point guard situation look like, right? Is that going to be their Achilles heel? Will that be the weakness that gets exposed in the postseason, in the playoffs later on? And seeing these signs of Amen Thompson starting to kind of figure things out a little bit, very, very encouraging stuff here. And hopefully he keeps it up, because this was by far the best playmaking, passing, point guard game of Amen Thompson's career. Loved what we saw out of him. I'm curious. I want to know what you saw out of Amen Thompson. What did you like about his performance in this game? Give me your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Coming up, sharing final thoughts from this Rockets 108-99 win, some of these struggles for the role players in this game. I want to talk a little bit specifically about Tari Eason's play, a little, up and down performance for Tari Eason in this one. We'll talk about that here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like being at an NBA game. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Gametime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. Pulling up the Gametime app, picking an upcoming game, and buying tickets is so incredibly easy with Gametime. You can see the all-in price up front. That's my favorite thing. No hidden fees, no price gouging at checkout. Full transparency from start to finish. Plus, they've got zone deals that you can take advantage of. Great last-minute ticket options as well. Everything is quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Remember, the best way to help us grow the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. The comments help us out a ton, guys. Please go comment on the show. Remember, we're going to have to bring it back. For the house, for the team, 4D algorithm. That's a throwback. If you're an everydayer and you remember that, that's a major throwback. All right. The role players for the Rockets really struggled in this game. This was one of those kind of games where the stars are doing all their heavy lifting, and then the Rockets needed every single point from KD and Şengün to be able to come out on top in this game, because there wasn't a single role player that really had it in this one. Jabari struggled. Tari got 17 points, but it was not a good 17. 17 points on 17 shots is just miserable efficiency. Kogi struggled. It was a bad Reed Sheppard night. Just struggles across the board for all of the Rockets role players. And I want to start I want to specifically hone in here on Tari, Eason, and Reed Sheppard in particular. For Tari, and this is tough for a guy like Tari, or even to a lesser degree, right? Guys like Jabari and Tari, who are still younger players, right? They're in year 4. They're both still kind of exploring their game. It's really tough to look at players like that and say, you are a role player, do nothing else, right? Like, you are only a role player, only play your role. The reality is they probably will be role players for their career, but it's also really tough to tell a young guy, hey, you can't be more than this. You're not allowed to be more than this. And there are times where Tari Eason steps outside of that role player lane and starts doing too much. And that's when it becomes a problem. And this was one of those games where, credit to Ime Udoka for benching Tari down the stretch, because he had some back-to-back turnovers late in the game and some questionable decision-making late in this one. And, Tari is still Tari. He makes a great impact. He's an incredible defender. The Rockets are a better team with his production and with him out on the floor. Still managed to shoot 50% from the floor. He had the hot start, went 3 for 3 to start the game from long distance, but then went 1 for 5 the rest of the way. And again, only 6 for 17 shooting overall. So the Rockets needed Tari's production, right? 17 points, 7 rebounds, couple steals, had a block mixed in there. But then some of the kind of Tari-esque moments, the bad decision-making or the tunnel vision on drives and not making the extra pass offensively, some of those moments, those are the things that he needs to go back, you need to go back on film and look at and try to, iron out those inconsistencies in his game. And that's where when you compare, right, like Tari to a guy like, for example, Dorian Finney-Smith, a guy who has been a role player for his career, understands his role on the floor and doesn't overextend himself, doesn't do more than what he's supposed to on the floor. And it's a delicate balance when you have a young player like that who's still exploring their game, who wants to see what more they can be, what more they can contribute, but at the same time, not doing it in a way that damages or hurts the rest of the team. And I think it was kind of a mixed bag for Tari Eason in that regard, because there were some possessions where you're just like, oh, thank goodness, Tari, big time 3 and, great defensive stops and some great moments there, but then some also kind of, knucklehead moments offensively, right? The turnovers or the poor shot selection, moments like that. So mixed bag for Tari Eason in this game. And then for Reed Sheppard, this is, I think, the way that Reed Sheppard should probably be handled. Is Ime gave him plenty of rope in this game to get going. It's not like he struggled in the first half and then he didn't see any second half minutes or anything like that. Ime gave him plenty of runway to try and get himself going. And this was just an off night. It was an off Reed Sheppard, and it's disappointing because it comes on the heels of it being announced that he'd be in the Rising Stars game, which should be a lot of fun to watch Reed Sheppard out there playing in the Rising Stars game at All-Star Weekend. But 4 points, 2 of 11 shooting, didn't hit a single 3-pointer, and also had a really bad turnover late in the game as Ime Udoka put him out there in one of those late, kind of not the closing lineup, but just one of those lineups late in the game as the Grizzlies were looking to kind of trap and pressure and still trying to see if they could sneak their way back into this game. Grizzlies applied ball pressure. Reed Sheppard, tried to dribble out the clock a little bit and wound up getting trapped at half court and turning the ball over. And that's call it rookie mistake, whatever. You don't dribble towards half court because you're boxing yourself in, right? The baseline and that half court line are basically like playing against an extra defender, because then you had 2 guys boxing you in. You can't go over and back over the half court line. And you could argue maybe he was, pushed. Maybe it was contact on the, I don't think it was a foul. It was just a turnover. And that's one of those moments that Reed's going to have to go back at and look on film and say, okay, this is where I messed up. And they were talking about it on the broadcast, right? It's a good learning experience for Reed Sheppard to be able to go back and look at that and see that. But it's also, credit to Ime Udoka for putting Reed out there, right? For putting Reed out there and saying, hey, they're pressuring. I need guys to go out there. I need, a good free throw shooter, because it looks like they're going to try and foul and extend the game. Trusted Reed to go out there and be one of those guys. And so that's one of those. And so the trust and the confidence from the coaching staff and from Ime Udoka is still there. And if Ime didn't believe in Reed, if he didn't trust him, he would have yanked Reed in the first half, and he wouldn't have seen the light of day in the second half. But that wasn't the case. It just really was an off night for Reed, just like it was kind of an off night for everybody. But if Reed isn't giving you, if he's not knocking down at least a few shots, teams still respect him from three, and they still guard him hard on the closeouts. And he had like a good drive where he got past the defense and they were overplaying him, and he drove downhill and finished at the rim. But this is just one of those opportunities to grow and learn from for Reed Sheppard. And look, you chalk it up. It was a bad game. Sometimes players have them, and then you move on to the next one. And then outside of that, like, it's just, the Rockets role players, I did like that. I mean, even it was for a very small stint, but Ime Udoka even injected Jae'Sean Tate into this game for a few minutes just because he wanted some energy and some life from the Rockets role players. And Jae'Sean Tate is great at doing that, at providing a little bit of a spark off the Rockets bench at times. And also some good moments from Josh Okogie. Josh Okogie's activity level was all over the place in this game. 7 rebounds, 2 assists, had a steal mixed in there. And when you compare the Rockets bench scoring to the Grizzlies bench scoring, that was one of the other key difference makers in this game. The Grizzlies wound up having, oh my goodness, I'm having to do quick math here, 25, 33, 40 bench points to just 9 bench points by the Rockets. The Grizzlies lead the NBA in bench scoring. The Rockets are bottom 5. They're like really, they're one of the worst teams in the NBA with bench scoring, or at least they get a majority of their points from the starters. The only team that scores more points from their starting lineup than the Rockets are the Lakers, with Luka, LeBron, and Reeves. But that's just one of those areas where, the Rockets and kind of the injury woes and the depth that they should have been able to rely on, right? Some of their depth has been inserted into the starting lineup, right? Tari Eason is one of those guys that is supposed to be able to come off the bench and be one of those role players, those difference makers off the Houston bench. And instead they have to start him because that's, arguably their best version of the starting lineup right now is with Tari Eason in place of Josh Okogie. So it's just the reality of the situation. The Rockets needed a lot of heavy lifting from their starting players to be able to get this win. But overall, good win, good star level play from Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun, and a great passing game from Amen Thompson gets it done. And this Rockets team just needs to keep stacking wins because they are not far off in a Western Conference, despite how rough things have been for this Rockets team. They are not far off from being at the top of the Western Conference. They are only a game back in the loss column from the San Antonio Spurs for the 2 seed in the West. And given how rough certain stretches of this season have felt to this point, that's a really encouraging sign, because if they can start figuring some things out, if Amen Thompson's got this point guard thing on lock moving forward, and if you get the best version of Alperen Sengun again moving forward, this Rockets team is going to be deadly and dangerous for the rest of the season. I want your thoughts on this Rockets Grizzlies game. Give me all your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Remember, the best way to help us grow the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.